All right, we're back here at Moment Machine, and we're building a 4-barrel manifold for this 2800 project. So I think building one out of the stock manifold is really your best bet, because stock manifold actually has kind of a runner shape where it'll actually have some momentum and inertia going through it. The Offenhauser parts out there, it's definitely very cool, definitely retro and vintage. The design of it, I think, is a little bit unique. It wasn't something that I was super in love with, and they're hard to find and kind of overpriced anyway, so I just figured it's like, well, because we have this manifold here, and I don't think it's going to be an outlandish amount of work. We had to space it up, so I have a clamp kit piece and then about another 3/16, and then I have a spacer down here, because you got to get this thing on there at some angle, but that's about the amount of angle is about 7/16 in the back, and then these two parts in the front. And what we're getting is a little bit, it's a very small ridge back here, but mainly I wanted to get it to clean this up. And I think that this will only take very minimal welding. I think we'll have to weld here, bridge this gap just across these 2 points here, and then ever so slightly out in front here. So the welding, I think, is going to be pretty minimal. And what I'm doing in my idea, my design, is I'm trying to get to the old WCFB teapot flange. Because from here, number one, these were all small 4-barrels from the 50s, like a Y-block or some old Chrysler, Chevy products, but this is what they had back then. It's a small, narrow pattern, and the actual size of the butterflies are much closer, you know, to this, what this engine's demands are going to be. Some of the old newer carburetors are just, you know, I think the opening's way too big for much higher horsepower, so we don't really need to get to the size of a modern 4-barrel as far as our opening goes. And then from this particular flange, they do make a few different adapters to get up to your normal size. So because some of these manifold bolt patterns, or these bolts, are so narrow, even the stock carburetor requires an adapter. So all we're going to try to do is get to this flange. I'm going to actually do at least 2 long ovals. Maybe I'll drop the divider down. I'll check it out when I get there. And then, you know, we'll use about a 1/2 inch thick flange, and then from there we'll be able to put our 4150, 4160 style on. So here we went and roughed this manifold in, and I just drew real simple the barrels onto the machine surface, and then I just used the roughing in mill, and I'm just getting close. Like, we can hand finish and do a little porting when we're done, but I think you're gonna see in all this that this barrel pattern is pretty suited for this size manifold. Everything's blending in pretty well on this particular area here. We'll just have to blend that by hand, but you don't really need to get really crazy, because as you can see, you know, we're making a substantial size in the inlet opening of the manifold right now. So I think that's actually a really good size for this project. So from here, I've got to, well, okay, the next thing I was going to do is I might just chase these 4 holes just by hand with like a 5/16 18 tap. And I think I'm going to secure the little adapter with these 4 bolts. I'll just take this gasket and You know, I'll put the holes in the gasket, maybe trim off a corner, but this is going to end up probably a slightly modified version of this will just be our gasket for our adapter. And yeah, I think this is, you know, if you view this just from changing it from one adapter to a different adapter, you know, it's pretty mild modification, really. You know, all it is, you know, slotting the holes out. You know, you got to mill the top down, get it shimmed up, you know, slot the holes, and then, you know, just have some very small amounts of welding done. I don't, and anytime you're working on a casting like this, you're going to have your best results. You know, number one, we're going to get it cleaner than this, but really preheat it, okay? That is like the secret to working on castings. You know, we work on castings here a lot and had to fix them. And don't ever take off on a casting like this and try to weld on it cold. You'll just not be happy, and bad things happen. You just get this manifold up and get it warm, 150 degrees even, 180 degrees, and your welding will just be so simple, and then the whole part will just uniformly cool down. You'll just have to put very minimal amperage to it to weld it, and then you just let it cool down real steady. But don't ever try to take off and weld on something like this stone cold. You'll just have horrible results, and your chances of warping it will just go through the roof. So anyway, I think I'm going to wrap this up for now. But yeah, what I'm going to do is, I think, because I have these little center hole deals, I think I'm going to tap these to 5/16 18, and then, you know, just right through here. It'll cross thread a little bit, but I don't care. I've done it before. It's actually fairly close. And all we're going to try to do is hold a carburetor on. I mean, it doesn't have to be that good. But I'll be able to put my center punches in here, and when I make my plate, I'm going to set it on here, center it up, and smack it, and then I'll be able to get these holes, and then I'll push those holes through it, and then stamp the holes in the gasket. And we're just gonna, wow, got it the wrong way. Yeah, it goes like that. You know, just bolt it down, and I think it's gonna be pretty done. So anyway, we'll look at it more as we get farther along. Okay, so I just hand tap these with the 5/16 bottoming tap, and then I mainly, so I could use this thing here. This is just a little, they have these thread in centering pieces, and then you can just kind of, they look like this. They come in a little kit thing, 5/16 18, but then you just thread them into every hole. And I just did it really quick. I just kind of, you know, sort of pressed on them with my fingers so I could get some idea where the bolt holes would come out. But yeah, other thought was, since this thing's already mounted on the mill, and this is only going to be naturally aspirated, truthfully, you might just epoxy this thing. It's very little, you know, like just putting a little in this corner, you know, grind it with a little burr, clean it up, acetone it. You can put some along the front here, and then just in these little, let it set up here, and then just do a quick face on it, and you're kind of done. You don't really need to take it off. I mean, I'm not really afraid to weld on it, but if some of you guys don't really want to weld, there's just not a lot to do. You know, it's 3 areas. I could see that being a really viable solution. You know, if you just mask this area, clean it, and fill in this gap, you know, filling these little troughs really easy. And then same thing, just you know, put a little dam out here, clay or something, and just prep this and clean it and just float this in, and I think that would work fine. And then you don't have to put any heat to it at all. And yeah, we are going to run the manifold bolts. So But I'm gonna do that in the end. What I'm gonna do is once I get the flange made, because there is a little bit of angular stuff going on here. Okay, the threads that I'm going to use here are at a slightly different angle than it's milled at, but I just, you know, we're not launching a satellite or anything here. All we're trying to do is just put some vertical pressure to hold our flange down. On this manifold though, once I get it bolted on, I'm probably gonna sneak up through the bottom and then poke this hole and this hole through my metal piece, and then at that point I'll re-level up the manifold, because you know we have it at an angle, and then I'll just countersink it and end up running long Allen bolts down here. So you know we'll end up finding whatever the right Allen bolt is, and then we'll just do the minimum countersink so that it doesn't you know, get into our intake manifold. But I think that's worked fine. You know, I don't see any issues with that. We'll still retain these two manifold bolts, and then they'll be in this aluminum adapter here and here. So, and I think, you know, this originally had a hex bolt. We get a Allen bolt. We'll be close to this surface, but there's going to be enough, there'll be enough isolation to seal those off. I don't see any issues with it. Okay, so instead of welding, I just decided to use epoxy in this area, and then around these this manifold boss. And I think for naturally aspirated, it's perfectly fine. If you were going to weld, you would only need, you know, you only need about 1/4 of an inch, a little less to seal, so you wouldn't need to put anywhere near this much. And all you'd really have to do would be to bridge, you know, one of these gaps, or both of these gaps, sorry. You wouldn't have to actually fill all this in. Yeah, I just put a little modeler's clay here, around here, and then on the outside, and just filled the epoxy, and then came back, since it's chucked up in the mill, and cut it off. So I've been using this gasket as a mock-up, but the next thing I got to do is build a little billet flange that's going to use the original 4 mounting bolts here and here. That'll hold it down. And then I put the holes in it. The manifold mounting bolts are going to go here, and I'm just going to actually have through holes be here. Sorry, the through holes will be right here and here, so the bolts will actually sit on the manifold. The flange basically will just go over the top of them, but I think it's better to actually just pull on the manifold when we're torquing down. So I think I mentioned it earlier, you know, I've milled this off at the angle I want. What I'm going to do is, these are milled untrue to the bolt hole, so I'm going to level the manifold out and then just re-spot face this and this, so that they're on the same trajectory as the manifold bolt surfaces. And then the flange will just end up encompassing, they'll just be small Allen bolts. I'll just get Allen bolts for that. So yeah, the next step is to get a piece of metal and build a flange that secures down with the 4 original mounting bolts, and then obviously it'll have the tapped holes. And then Edelbrock makes a adapter. So just to give you kind of an idea, this is a highly modified version of one of them. They actually streamlined down really well to the size we're using, but it'll end up kind of looking like this when it's done. But I won't. I bought one of these. I know about the adapter because I had one, and I totally modified it to fit something else. And so, you know, but it's this adapter unmodified. So yeah, this will sit a little taller, but in the end, that's sort of what it'll look like. So Anyway, I think we'll come back to it when we have the billet flange made. I just got to find time to do that. And then if I get any interest, because the billet flange will be kind of special. It'll obviously have, you can see a lot of holes. It'll have the mounting holes for what the older style carburetor. It'll have the bolt holes to secure this adapter to the manifold, and then it'll have clearance holes. So it'll be a little bit involved, but yep, that's kind of where our manifolds come so far. So we milled this down and then added material in important areas, and we're making a little template for the flange we have to make. And yeah, I mean, if people you know, are interested in this mod, you know, maybe we'll have some of those flanges CNC'd out, because it doesn't really take a ton of work to get to here. So this will be the only real custom part, and then the unmodified version of this spacer is something that can be purchased. So all right.